Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Interpretation Podcast. And once again, I'm one of your co-hosts, Alain Breton, and I'm here with Brian. How you doing, Brian?
Doing great. I'm ready for another one.
Cool. And we're also with Katharine Allen. So how you doing, Katharine?
Doing well. I'm happy to be here today.
All right, let's kick it. So we're going to start with Katharine's bio. So Katharine is actually a community and conference trained interpreter with over 3 decades experience. She's the director of language industry learning at Boostlingo, SaaS, I hope I said that correctly, technology company providing remote interpreting solutions. And she's a licensed trainer and co-author of the Indigenous Interpreter, the Community Interpreter International, and the Remote Interpreter textbooks and training programs. She served for 10 years as co-president of Interpret America, working to raise the profile of interpreting. She's the founding member of the American Association of Interpreting and Translation in Education and the Safe AI in Interpreting Task Force. She's a longtime industry observer, former president of the California Healthcare Interpreting Association, and holds a Master in Translation and Interpretation from the Milber Institute of International Studies. What a CV. Have I missed anything?
No. I always say that if you stick at it long enough, that's what happens. You end up with a CV that looks like that. You've been around long enough.
So the first question is, we already spoke with Sylvester Hawley a few months ago regarding Safe AI, and you're also part of the Safe AI task force. So I thought we could start there. Has there been any development?
Yeah, I think I wanted to kind of share out our top priorities coming, into the new year. And really, so last year we were able to finalize research and then create guidance. So generalized guidance around how you might be able to approach sort of an ethical and guardrailed approach, to implementing AI and interpreting, especially in the US. This is such a huge issue because the bulk of interpreting services go into immigrant-based services. So it's regulated spaces where you have to provide equal access and meaningful access. So this year, we're hoping to really build upon that. And we're working on a really concrete kind of decision-making criteria tool that we do hope to complete by mid-year. And the idea along that would be to make it concrete. So if you are the procurement officer, either in a school or a government agency or a company, you would not only have a foundation to understand the criteria you need to be considering. Am I in a regulated space? Am I not in a regulated space? What applies to me? What doesn't? But also just providing really concrete checklists for your area to be able to say, if you're considering implementing an AI tool into interpreting, especially into speech to speech, like the full on, the interaction, to have kind of a checklist of what you want to vet for, what you want to be able to understand how these tools could impact meaningful communication, right? What they can do, what they can't do, where they're strongest, where perhaps you might hold off and continue with a human model. So yeah.
Is this for the settings where, say, you have you're used to having a human interpreter, and then they want to maybe try to use AI, and then this is kind of like the baseline to be able to choose what is a good AI tool to use and what the standards are and what the code of ethics are and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So so say you're, in the tourism industry and, you've got companies saying, hey, we can just do everything for you, because the companies promise everything, right? It's the magical unicorn. We can communicate in 300 languages, exactly the same, with no differentiation. And that's not actually what the products do. So the tool would be to help people really understand, okay, what is your use case? And is this a good place to implement AI or not? And so if you're in the tourism industry and you're trying to increase access for languages to get into your, to funnel you down into perhaps that human customer service agent, that it's not as regulated. There's going to be a lot of use cases where that's they're immediately obviously helpful use cases. But if you're a courtroom or a school or a hospital, there are still a lot of use cases where AI can expand access, but it is a much more tightly regulated interaction. And so it's really on the buyer at this point, in the absence of really defined guidance or laws. We're not going to get legislation on it, particularly, that's going to really be helpful. So you have to look at the existing laws and decide whether the AI tool keeps you in compliance with those laws or doesn't, right? And where. So if you are a health clinic that wants to have AI for scheduling, for example, that might be a great place to start to pilot it and figure out, okay, does it work for a Somali patient as well as it works for a Spanish-speaking patient? Maybe, maybe not, right? But you probably don't want to stick it in with the nurse or the doctor, because that's where those tools actually can't do the full nuanced dialogic
Is it also
interpreting.
because for concerns for safety, for instance, let's say there's a prescription and they were saying two pills rather than 20. Well, a human will be able to make sure that it's two rather than 20, but the machine doesn't check that.
The machine can't detect its own errors yet, right? So one of the big issues in the United States anyway is around both meaningful access and equal access. So
what's the difference?
Well, meaningful access would mean the idea is that if I'm an English speaker and I go in and I go and see a doctor and I'm given sort of access to the healthcare system in a certain way. And if I'm an immigrant who speaks Spanish or Somali or Arabic, the mandate is that they have to have the same level of access. So, right, it has to be the same level. So is the tool you're looking at, despite whatever promises the vendor may be making, does it preserve that meaningful access? Can you guarantee it? Is anybody testing it? Who's overseeing it? Is your Arabic speech-to-speech, nursing aid as accurate as your Spanish speech-to-speech, for example? Or what are you doing with your indigenous languages? So it's more, you have to really vet these tools, right? And in this new age and we're so early in the adoption phase that really it's on buyers. I think, it's really on all of us to vet the tools. They're powerful tools. They're amazing. They can they can support interpreting in many different ways, but it's particularly that speech, like I'm talking to you, Brian, you're my doctor. And, you whip out the French interpreter. And then what? Then there's a cultural misunderstanding. Then it's clear the patient is an understanding, but the AI can't kind of nudge and say, I think there may be a problem with understanding. All the things that a trained interpreter does to really make sure that the full communication comes across. There's a lot of things that AI can't do right now in the direct communication. That makes sense.
Yeah, I would feel that it would be difficult. We spoke to someone who was a medical interpreter and she was talking to us about being in labor delivery and being with the patient from the moment where the labor starts until the baby is born. And I'm not sure how an AI tool would be able to help her.
Right.
The mom.
But to give it that, like, just even in that example, think about a long labor. The woman's not always, it has somebody there. You've got an iPad by the side, and you could use an AI tool to say, and moving especially away from Spanish, but in a harder to access language, it's like in a African language or whatever it would be, to say, hey, I need help. Like, where you could actually engage with the iPad and send a message that is pretty reliable, and then you get the humans back in the room. I mean, there's lots of ways that we're going to see these tools like deepen access and expand access, but we just have to be very mindful about how they're being implemented.
So if I understand, the idea is to have this to expand the access rather than thinking about replacing the interpreter.
Right. Well, that's what the profession would like. That's what Safe AI would like, right? I think there's a lot of, if you're looking at Meta and, OpenAI and all the companies, I mean, they are selling maybe it's an overused metaphor, but really that kind of universal translator from Star Trek idea that somehow, you and I are from a different world, and we speak out loud and you don't see what's on in the background. And I hear you in this great American English, but you're from, Saturn or something. I mean, that's what the promise is. But the reality is those tools are based on a lexical transference of meaning, right? It's not word to word, but it's like the program language is in, and you're getting kind of a lexical level of what words were said. And you can get pretty sophisticated with that, but it's not trained for all the layered communication, especially that happens in dialogue. Is the person, how distressed is the person? How much background noise is there? Are they mentally altered? Maybe it's somebody with a disability, right? Or maybe it's just a person who had low formal education and comes in and is using a lot of actually quite simple terms to mean a lot of different things, which you see a lot with some parts of the immigrant community. They come in, they haven't had a lot of formal education, and so they have limited vocabulary to express the totality of what's happening to them. And like a trained interpreter navigates all that. AI is going to navigate the words, and they'll say, look, I hurt my leg, and the patient points to their, to their foot. That, or vice versa. Like that's a common example in Spanish where some communities use the term foot and leg, to get like they can use it for the same thing.
Yeah, in Japanese is the same thing. They have the same word for foot and leg.
Right.
So if you you have some pain on your leg or your foot, maybe you got to point it or with context. But
right. And so does the AI say, which do you mean, foot or leg? Right. I mean, what's the where the interpreter might say, could you please indicate for the doctor what body part you mean, or right. So not to belabor the point, but
so how do say an education board or a hospital, how do they know to contact AI to see if a certain tool that they want to use is what they promised them?
Well, that's what we're, in terms of Safe AI, we're trying to provide, a robust enough instrument for them to have as a guide, right? But ultimately, they're going to have to work with their legal counsel and their own understanding, because we are, the technology is outpacing legislation, it's outpacing policy, it's outpacing research into what's best, right? So, and the companies are selling very rigorously into all of these spaces all around the world, right? But they're, hey, we've got your educational interpreting needs taken care of. Hey, there are several companies selling into healthcare saying we have HIPAA compliant and ethically compliant. I mean, they promise the moon, like our AI, adheres to all ethical codes of conduct. And of course, it's absurd because embedded in those ethical codes of conduct are all those kinds of interventions we just described. And that's, AI can't do that, right? It can't do any of that. I can't kind of manage and observe and moderate in a conversation. Yeah. So our goal is to provide a robust tool for guidance, from like the RFP side and the procurement side and the direct buy side, and then just get the word out, like, do your due diligence, because on the flip side of that, if you don't, is potentially lawsuits and harm and all the rest of it, right?
If the danger, for lack of a better word, always there that the machine will make a mistake because we know the technology is not ready yet, or I'm not sure if it'll ever be ready.
Yeah.
Why would a hospital or any other institution that knows that it's a matter of health or life and death in certain cases, why would they take that chance?
Well, I think it's a mix. I mean, I think it's a cost is a big one, right? I mean, the pressure on any kind of institution to keep costs down is really big. I mean, whether it's a company meeting its margins or, a public institution meeting its budgets, and simplicity, right? It sounds so good. Doesn't it sound great? You just, click the language pair and you're set. I think that there's a deep, profound ignorance in the world of what human communication is versus linguistic communication, like what makes up the totality of expressed meaning. It goes way beyond words, but we just tend to think of it as like, oh, they got all the words right. They got the grammar right. They got the syntax right, but they don't get the expressions on your faces. They don't get, just even the most simple thing. Like if I came in and said, well, hello, you guys. Nice to be here today. AI is going to do that the same as, oh, hello, you guys. Nice to be here today.
Yes, it was nice having you.
Right? I mean, it's like, it's not going to catch all that. So,
no, absolutely.
Which is just even as simple as that. So I think people don't think of, unless you're in the language services, you don't think about what it actually means to communicate multilingually and cross-culturally. And so I just think it's a lot of mix of ignorance, expediency, believing the vendors, whatever it is, right? All across the board.
Yeah, I saw one in action at a conference once. And yeah, firstly, it takes quite a bit of time because it does take your spoken language and tries to jig it into coherent sentences in the original language. And then once it does that, then it'll literally translate the sentence into the other language rather than understanding what you're saying and interpreting it. So yeah, it's more of a translation than an interpretation.
But I would say it's more like a transcription.
Yeah, well,
it detects sounds, it turns it into words, it doesn't understand, then it flips it into a different language, and maybe 90% of the time, maybe it's accurate, but if you're in a professional, if I go to a foreign country, and if I go to Germany, I don't speak German, maybe it'll help me at the restaurant.
Yeah, but for conversational.
But when it comes to professional settings.
Like or high stakes, however you want to define high stakes. I mean, it's like think of it as machine translation with a voice layover, right? It's, some machine translation you can train.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's what it is. And it's what it probably always will be, at least for the immediate future. But that is why it's inserted. I mean, it has integrated or penetrated much farther into remote simultaneous. Like AI is penetrated much deeper into the event space and conference interpreting space. That's where it's had its most gain and most disruption right now, because if it's one to many communication, if I'm giving a speech, first of all, I'm going to speak in a more structured, almost written way. The AI tools handle it better. If they get 95% or 90 correct, it still helps the audience understand the great majority of what was said, and whether it missed the joke here or there, like depending on the context, it's not perfect, but it's one reason why it's where there's been a lot of success, I guess, selling. I mean, I don't know. It depends on your point of view. I mean, it's definitely put pressure on conference interpreting.
Yeah, and what I've noticed too is that the voice is very robotic that comes out, and yeah, it's like you're repeating what is in the transcription.
Right.
And if you don't, you can also have the option of not having the voice and just reading it. But at that point, you're looking at your phone while you're trying to follow a conference.
Right.
So you get these, like, there's the PowerPoint presentation, then there's your phone, and there's the speaker. Like, it just creates quite a bit of confusion in order to follow.
Right.
So like,
but if you're trying to reach 30 languages, you're never going to pay for 30 teams. You might pay for 5 teams. You might pay for your top 5 languages, but you want to at least have it available to languages that never would have it. I mean, it's
well, that was the benefit of that one agency, is that you pay for one language, but you can put any language you want. So they can do like 12 languages, and you pay for just one.
Yeah.
And you get the transcript at the end of the conference too for free. Like, they do have a lot of added value when it comes to that on a commercial standpoint. But if it's like a 2-day conference in one language, I don't see the point. Financially, it doesn't make sense.
Well, that's why one of the research efforts that came out of our work last year on Safe AI was that CSA Research took that evidence and did more research, and then they published in the fall the speech-to-speech automated interpreting report. And in that, they have that report is free and available on the Safe AI task force website. And it's so valuable. But one of the things that it lays out is that it's not going to be it's not a binary choice. Where we're headed into is an era of hybrid services. So you're going you might, sometimes it may be only human or all AI, but actually it's likely to be in some mix of, like, they had 7 different like hybrid mixes that they see developing. Because some of it's like interpreting with human oversight after the fact, interpreting, AI interpreting with immediate human oversight, and then a blend of interpreting with the use of supportive AI like transcription or automatic glossaries, or depending on
what. Just making things much more complicated. When there's a conference interpretation, there's a booth, there's an interpreter, there's the headsets, and listen and make sure that the agency has professional interpreters on board. It's a lot more simple. I think that it's not because these features are available that they'll be widely used. I think that there may be some hype in the beginning, and then it's like for self-driving. I think of self-driving cars. There's a lot of things that help on the road, but we're still very far away, especially in our winters that we have here in Canada. It's winter 6 months a year here.
Right.
It's colder where you are too.
I live in the mountains, actually, in California, believe it or not. So I understand. I live in the snow zone.
I was going to say California, but now you're in a snow zone. So
I'm in the snow zone in California. I'm the rare outlier. I agree, but I disagree in the sense that they are those tools. It's a little bit like when machine translation came in, and you could suddenly get a gist of all of Twitter in a day, right? Like the world that it expands. The ability to have multilingual communication expands out incredibly, but the quality pushes down. But so I think that my biggest concern, I'll tell you my own personal biggest concern for our profession, is that we'll put so much stress on our training institutions, because we'll end up with this elite where is human interpreting going to go? It's going to go into like the most needed and important and high risk conversations. I worry that we don't have enough training infrastructure to sustain a big drop off of people not coming into the field. So that's probably my biggest personal angst that I worry about.
This is the current.
I know.
Canada, this is the situation in Canada right now.
Yeah. There's a huge shortage of interpreters for everything, whether it's the courts or whether it's conference interpretation, the federal government. Sometimes the federal government doesn't have enough interpreters, so they're just at a standstill. They can't do anything.
Right. There's not enough training programs already. Right.
No.
And then And then with,
Right,
you
not
know,
enough
so
people in the training programs
right,
either.
right. Not enough
Yeah.
people in the training programs, not enough incentive to go into the field. So this is, I think there's a lot of churn right now. And for those of us in leadership in any way, like protecting our training and protecting that pipeline is really important as this settles down. I mean, we're going to go through a lot of disruption with these tools, you know, and at some point it's going to settle out in over on the other side of that hype cycle. But, you know, will we still have those some of the key things we've worked so hard in the last 60 years to build inside the profession? It's like, that's kind of where my focus is.
I almost feel like if it's something like the European Union where they have like 19 different languages and all of a sudden they decide that they're going to do AI and, you know, that's the end of all of these jobs in Europe. Like, I just feel like that's like the beginning of the end almost.
That's probably the most protected space, right? Like the international organizations in Europe and simultaneous interpreting came into being at the same time as those, you know, as those institutions were created. So like it got integrated in natively, right? So that to me is the most protected place for conference interpreting is in those institutions. But there's a huge conference interpreting market, you know, outside for nonprofits and events and corporate events and, you know, all that skill set that really, you know, that you need. And that's where it already is kind of coming in on the edges. So yeah, I guess I would wrap her. I don't want to be too negative because I just find that's the point of our work in the Safe AI is like, we're really trying to provide real tools to help people say, hey, you don't want to, you need to hire humans here and you want to hire and here's the quality they should have and here's what you should be vetting for, you know.
Have you, at Safe AI, have you had some thought on 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, what we could expect with the current changes?
Well, I mean, I think everybody's thinking about it, not just at Safe AI.
But there's a difference between going with some fear because you're afraid of losing your work and having a real deep conversation about it.
Yeah.
And for me, there's a big distinction here because I think a lot of people are fearful, which is completely normal. But I don't know, maybe it's just me, my personality, or the way I see things. And I see this as added features. And it's not the first time that I say that if you're specialized in a certain way, you're going to be ahead. And so far, all of these tools are making me a better interpreter rather than completely replacing me. And there's never been so much work, actually.
Right. So I think it's a really complicated question because interpreting is anywhere there is multilingual communication. And so there are so many kinds of interpreting and intersections of interpreting. And so you have at a conference interpreter level, if you're established and if you're us and you've been in the field for a while and AI hits and you've got your clients and you can adapt and you're actually willing to adapt to the technology, I think we'll ride it out. You know, we have, you know, parts of our workforce that are really under-resourced and underpaid and undertrained, including the remote interpreting workforce or a lot of the on-site community interpreting workforce. I mean, these are very vulnerable workforces to these changes, and it's much harder and less likely for them to really adapt these technological tools without a lot of, you know, educating and conference attending and people. I mean, it's like getting that out there to other parts of the workforce, you know, is much more complicated. So I guess to answer your question in a really big way, to me, AI is like, you know, it's like before the internet and after the internet, right? So if you think about when the internet hit, that changed every single industry on the planet pretty much, right? And in some, it changed instantaneously. It took 10 years to lose travel agents and, you know, ATM tellers. And I mean, some things just absolutely changed it altogether. And it became a self-serve, you know, economy, and other shift from brick and mortar. So many things got digitized and things that used to be brick and mortar aren't. I mean, like, you know, just even our cell phones that we hold, like everyone's seen those graphics of this replaced like 20 devices or whatever it was.
Oh, yes, yes.
So I think AI is like, it's that big of a sea change and it's going to change everything. It doesn't mean it's going to wipe everything out. It's just going to change how it's done. And so for some people, it will be, you know, negative in how it impacts them, and others will thrive with it, right?
Yeah, I always see it as more options on the table. You know, my kids now buy record albums,
right?
But they're Spotify. And
I know my kids do too.
The trend is like buying records,
right?
And so I'm like, I should have bought those records.
I
in the
should have
90s.
never thrown
I
away
should
my
have, yeah.
records, right?
I've changed it. I went from records to CD, and CD. I
I
was like,
know.
I don't need the CDs anymore.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say is my approach to this is it brings more options to the table.
Mhm.
It doesn't necessarily replace. I've got a Kindle, but I've never had so many books in my house. I
Right.
don't even know where to put them.
Right.
And bookstores are still there.
Right.
They still sell millions of books every year.
But there aren't as many. And they do it differently. So it's a really good use in case. And there was a huge dip for a while where books were really.
But then when you realize that it's not as good as holding a real book, you realize that, having this black and white kind of and grainy image, like it was not that fun to read.
So I can see some places where it would be very useful to have AI. For example, like in a hospital, because interpreters are usually told to go to a certain department in the hospital.
Right.
But wouldn't it be great if there was something at the entrance of the hospital that said, "Listen, where's this department so I can not get this, so I don't get lost." It tells them in that language where to go and how to get there. Or like the same thing as like a courthouse. When an interpreter is asked to go to courtroom, they're not meeting them at the entrance of the courthouse. So that would be a great place to put that too, implement that kind of technology. So like I do see it like where they can live symbiotically, where someone's there to greet you with AI, but then there's a human that's going to make sure that you're not going to go to jail in court, or that you're not going. You just have to pay a fine. How much? You're not over like you're, and that.
No,
I think,
and companies are throwing the spaghetti at the wall with all of those examples. I can give you an example of every single one of those examples you just gave of like the court kiosks in the court. Kiosks in DMV and Minnesota, targeting like their Hmong. I mean, which of the languages they're targeting there? Two, like one is Hmong and another is, trying to remember, hard to, like languages that you actually need to train the AI on the languages to make sure the answers. But like you go in, there's a kiosk, you click on the screens and everything's been translated and vetted, right? And so, and it just greatly expands access, and that's great. And then perhaps when you get to the actual window and the conversation gets too complicated, that's when you would pick up the phone and engage a live interpreter. So I think that's the hybrid. This is the hybrid there that CSA research is talking about.
I've got two questions in mind. The first one is what's the role of insurance companies in America in maybe putting some pressure and say, okay, you have to adopt these technologies in order to save some cost, or it's not really an issue? I
just think in the US right now, it's really, we just don't know how things are going to land. I think right now there's a huge push inside the government to, whereas Biden had sort of more of a guardrail approach and had his executive AI order that, that was one of the very first things that got overturned with the new administration. And now you have, my understanding is the edict is just like AI everywhere, get it everywhere. But of course, it's not really following right now. So the expected channels that we would have followed before. So it's going to be, I think it's just going to be state by state, company by company, hospital. I mean, there's going to be just sort of a lot of finding your way forward. But I will say that the laws that govern in the United States that kind of govern that language access and in broad, in healthcare and in law enforcement and education and social services, and for the AD, for the sign language, the American Disabilities Act, like those are law. Those are still laws. They're going to be laws. Going to be hard. I mean, a lot of them are based on the Civil Rights Act. So I just think there's still a law on the Civil Rights Act. So in the United States, you had the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and that's what almost, spoken language, language access laws all stem from that foundational law. So, people are just going to find their way forward. And, I think I have found, very useful that, have you guys, seen that image of what the hype cycle is for new technology? Have you seen that kind of concept? So there's this, forgive me, I don't have it right in front of me, but it actually just applies to technologies. It has nothing to do with language access, but there's sort of a model that when a new disruptive technology comes into place, you'll have a huge spike of hype. It's the end of the world. It's the savior of the world, right? Which is what we've had with AI. It's like,
November
it's good. Yeah. So, right. And then it's like you get all the way to the top, and then you kind of go back down. It's like, oh, it's not as good as they thought it was. It's no big deal. Let's not get right. I mean, it's like you get this sort of counter reaction. But in the meantime, companies and everybody involved are slowly figuring out how to adopt and integrate. And so you end up with this like curve where it spikes up, it goes down, and then you end up with kind of this. And so if you think about that with other technologies on language access or other disruptive technologies that are related to language access as well. You think of remote interpreting, video remote interpreting. You think of RSI, for example, just coming in. Like those are the before COVID. If you talk to a conference interpreter about RSI, it was just almost a universal rejection of that. And then, of course, during COVID, everybody became RSI experts because that was how they earned their living, right? And now it's an integrated part of conference interpreting. RSI is an integrated part of the service, and people don't really question it anymore. But if you think about to 2019, it was the big thing was like, no, this is awful. RSI is awful. Yeah. And you have to still fly the interpreters in, and you have to bring in all the headsets. And it's like the whole, of course we do. It's lovely. I mean, it definitely degrades like some of the fun, but on the other hand, it expanded work for everybody.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Right?
I have a question. You spoke about RSI, and I read in your bio that you're the director of language learning industry at Boostlingo.
Yeah.
Personally, I worked on the Boostlingo platform once in my life a few years ago, but I'm not really familiar with it. So is that a platform that integrates AI? Is it like what's the name, Interprefy, or was the other one Kudo? Is it the same kind of thing?
So Boostlingo is a SaaS company, a service as software company. And so we are a technology company over which we have technology over which a lot of interpreting happens. The core of Boostlingo is actually as an OPI, over the phone interpreting, and VRI, video remote on demand interpreting. So Boostlingo is like one of the largest companies, if not the largest. It's built out. Most of our services are selling into healthcare and education and legal, largely in the US, but we do have clients all around the world, right? And so, but Boostlingo acquired VoiceBoxer, if you remember VoiceBoxer, which is one of the same tool. VoiceBoxer was like Kudo and Interprefy. So it was one of the first remote simultaneous interpreting technology platforms that allowed you to actually do simultaneous interpreting.
So it's what's behind all of these other platforms.
It's behind. It's like, it's Zoom. When the COVID first hit, like Zoom had a very rudimentary interpretation feature, and that's why everyone went to Zoom, because it had the ability to have multiple audio channels for simultaneous interpreting, whereas for on-demand interpreting, like I'm in a hospital and somebody comes in and they speak Italian, and I don't have an Italian interpreter hired, and so I call my remote service, and there's a Italian interpreter waiting to do a medical call, which will be consecutive. So Boostlingo has been in that field, and then we actually acquired a RSI technology in 2022, which was VoiceBoxer. Now it's Boostlingo Events. Part of Boostlingo, we do have a RSI solution, and it does have an AI transcription integration into it. Yeah.
Transcription, just like the caption that I turn on Zoom, or is it more advanced than that?
It's multilingual. So, Boostlingo Events has, sort of its strength is in the user interface. Like you can have the slides come up. You can, put up slides in all the languages that you have the interpreting booths in. You can have a transcription. You can choose the language into which you want it transcribed. And it's, so you can, if you're listening and if you want to hear it in Italian, you can see the transcription in Italian, even, so it provides the translation as well, in real time. Right. And so, yeah.
And what surprises me a little bit is that now I see a relationship between Boostlingo and Safe AI. And since Boostlingo is a player in the industry that has AI feature, but at the same time, there's a link with Safe AI, which tries to establish guardrails. So is it sort of the industry trying to basically be proactive and to make sure that everything happens safely?
Well, I'd say, first of all, in terms of Boostlingo, I've been very fortunate to work for a company that, one, has clearly stated just publicly around AI, like human interpreting is the gold standard and AI is the supportive standard. So we're taking that approach of it, like we want AI to support human interpreting, wipe it out or replace it. But they've been very supportive in me participating in the Safe AI task force. Like, so it's kind of one of my hybrid hat roles, right? I participate as myself, but the company has really supported my work there and has supported the work actually, financially to some degree of Safe AI, as have other companies. But to answer your question in a broader way, so if you all remember when machine translation hit, the translation world, Translators had a very, very strong negative reaction for a long time and refused to have anything to do with it. And when the cat tool companies came around and said, we want to partner with you, the translators were like, forget it. And so eventually they partnered with the companies.
I was one of them.
Right. One of the companies or one of the, right.
One of the reluctant translators.
Right. And so, but the downside of that was that the individual practitioner missed out on a chance to really influence those tools. And then when we had mobile technology and the smartphone, the result of that was a 10-year slow build of remote interpreting technology that the leadership and professional associations in the field just never got a handle on. To this day, we don't have national associations with published standards for best practices on remote interpreting, right? To this day, right? And the unfortunate result is now you have an offshored, poorly paid by the minute workforce for remote when you're talking about community interpreting, and you have an on-site paid by the hour at least, and like better paid and benefited on-site interpreter workforce. So it allowed us, there were real negative consequences to the field not getting a handle on it. And I think when we all saw AI come in, there was sort of a core, people have just been in leadership for a long time. We were like, we have to have some kind of interpreting specific industry and professional response to this fast. So that we all took those lessons and we're like, we want to be able to be in the conversation. And so we ramped up the formation really quickly because of that. And we really raised money and we did the first research and we've been pushing out these tools and the other side of the work we do a lot is we present in a lot of places. And that has been successful. Like we managed to get Safe AI into in front of a lot of different government agencies and a lot of, different even state level agencies and big hospitals and things like that. So the broader question to your answer is yes, it is an industry response, but it's not Boostlingo's response. It's like, it is a broader interpreting advocacy response. Like we'd like to be at the table a little bit.
Yeah.
These big macroeconomic forces that we're all, So for whatever we can, we're like the little, we're like the little raft, trying to.
But so unfortunately, I have so many questions.
Unfortunately, what do you mean unfortunately? Take the time.
No, because we're already close to the end of our podcast, and it's just gone by so fast. But I guess one most important of all the questions, I guess, would be if you work with, does Safe AI work with AIC at all? Because AIC, for those who aren't interpreters, it's the International Association of Conference Interpreters. And they have a science hub that works with the pros and cons of AI and how to use it properly and that kind of thing. Do you have ties with AIC?
We have ties, and when we did our first call out for participation, we've definitely had participation from people in Europe across the board. The task force at its core has really been building out kind of inside the U.S. and also in focusing quite a bit on, a partnership between the deaf and hard of hearing community as well around ASL and sign language interpreting. There's not right now, we don't have an immediate link, with AIC in terms of you're doing this, you're doing that, but it's like we definitely are paying attention to all of it. And hopefully, AIC is as well. And we're trying to build up so I've been so glad to see the response that AIC has had. And when we take into consideration all the trends and sort of the global trends of what are we trying to safeguard? Where are the guardrails? How do we do this, in an ethical way? Those are the kinds of efforts that all get fed into our work as well. So we pay attention to all of the EU law and where the laws are around the world and what are the, the core criteria. So eventually, hopefully we'll get there. It's hard to build out. Where do you start? So we've just been trying to what can we actually do with this small amount of resources we have? And so that's kind of been the big focus has been to try and get actionable sort of documentation out there.
Yeah, and I just came out with their list of universities and academic institutions that they promote for interpretation. Like when you were talking about how what we need to do in the future, I'm almost thinking an academic revolution where interpretation and AI both meet up in these different universities to be able to marry both of them or make them work together so that Alain says he's become a better interpreter with AI. I feel the same way. So it would be great if you can kind of rejig the whole academic sector to be able to have both at once in the same institution where people who want to be interpreters can harness that better.
Yeah, and you've hit I think that earlier concern and angst that I was expressing, I think that's exactly what we need to see. And I think actually to some degree, you need those regionalized relationships and organizations to care. Like that is a effort that IEC is uniquely positioned to be able to do inside Europe, right? I mean, that is and it's so important because that's how we could strengthen those programs and keep them relevant. And if you come to like Australia or the US or Canada, when you're talking about, the majority of the interpreting market is community based, it's medical, legal, then you're looking at short course training programs. You're not looking at very many truly academic programs. You're looking at a whole host of like certificate and 2-year programs and short course. And so then you have to take your positioning locally as well and try and do the same thing in that different structure, right? So I just think it takes we all have to do it, right? So
Absolutely.
So I love that initiative. It's great.
All right. So Brian, have you asked all of the questions you wanted to ask?
No, I haven't.
We still have a few more
We're out
minutes.
of
It's all
time.
right. Go for it. You can ask whatever more. What do we have? 6 minutes officially?
Yeah, officially. And then we'll cut out the less important focus on either. Alain, do you have any last?
Oh, in my case, I find it fascinating, and I just want to bring you again in like 6 months to a year from now, or bring other people from Safe AI just to see what the evolution is. But personally, my last question would be, what's next for you guys?
Well, what's next is this year so Safe AI is working to turn itself into an actual legal entity, because right now, we started up as a task force, as a work group, because we just wanted to hit the ground running. So I think probably will take most of the year to get it fully converted into whatever, whatever version of a nonprofit I think it'll be converted into. And that is where we did in the course of our initial research, we really did forge what I think is the sort of united effort between sign language and spoken language interpreting. And so that we're trying, we're working to preserve all of that as we move into organization. And then in terms of for you and for what really, I think helps the broader public is to really work on getting that actionable document. Like if you're a company procuring AI, if you're in the government and you're writing the RFP, you may not be familiar with RFP processes, but so often the request for proposals that you get, like that go out in the government, there's so much ignorance about the profession. So you fill out these, you're trying to I'm a language company and I'm going to provide services to XYZ. And the actual request for proposal is so poorly written, you're kind of trying to educate them. So we're trying to provide these tools from that side and from the procurement side and really give people concrete, like something that they can take to their supervisor and say, this is why we should or shouldn't consider this tool that you're looking at that promises to save 50% on our budget, that kind of thing. That's really our immediate focus. And then and continuing to present as widely as we can. And then after that, we definitely have, I know one of the other really big areas of interest we have is working on how can you get some kind of labeling into the use of an AI in interpreting so that the user knows. This is one of the main, just around the world, that transparency criteria. How do you know that? Because they may sound robotic to you right now, Brian, on an RSI platform, like the voice that gets generated, but these voices are getting really sophisticated really fast. And then you have avatars that are showing up on the screen. They look like people.
Yeah.
And so it's like working on labeling so that you can know that you're receiving the services of an AI tool versus a person, so that you have some agency in that as a consumer.
Even if the voice becomes natural, I'm having a hard time, and maybe it's my own ignorance here, to see the day where the machine will be able to say, well, you know what? You've got terminal cancer. You got to use a sadder voice. And now we're going to sing a song for children and you need to have a happy voice.
You'd be surprised. I don't know if you've gone and listened to Google, if you go in and to the Google Notebook LM and do a research to prep for your next interpreting
Google
assignment.
LM, I use it sometimes in order to
you
create
click
a
on
podcast.
So the podcasts are pretty good, right? We're not that far away from this.
But I'm sure we've got better ratings.
I hope so. I'm just saying the goal. And there's so many different kinds of interactions. I already know, even on a customer service level in the chatbot, I'm always like, okay, I'm on their AI right now. And it's let me transfer you to a customer service rep. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to get the human. That's what we're that would be the kinds of things that I think are coming next. Is like knowing that you're in with an AI bot, great, it's helping. And then knowing when you could, like, ideally the consumer can trigger it over.
9 times out of 10, the explanation that I give is like, and then I kind of hear fake typing and like, hold on, we're going to give you a human being right now.
Right.
So,
It's like, I don't understand that. Or when you get the same response over and over, it's like, okay, then I'm going to have to make an actual phone call.
give me, one time I was so angry. I was like, I want to speak to a human. What is your request? Human, human.
Exactly. That's not my point.
I wouldn't be calling you. I could Google it.
Yeah, what's next is as much like everybody needs to be using their critical thinking and you're taking responsibility for adoption of these tools. They are, I mean, the way that they can help an interpreter. If you're an interpreter and you're not using AI for prep, then I don't know what you're doing, because it's incredible. It's like night and day what you can do. You know, it's incredible.
Absolutely.
Already. You know, so it's just like, as an individual, just pick one of these tools, start using them. Don't delay. Don't be the translator that never would touch machine translation, and then you're behind. It's like we have to be adapt. We're in another moment of adaptability, right? That
or like if you're hesitant too, like you just use it for a different thing,
just
like
use
something
it,
personal,
plan
and
a
then
date
see
night.
how it works for you, and then from there maybe transfer it over to your work life. Yeah,
bit by bit by bit. I use it. I have a daughter who's living over in the UK, and I frequently chat with one of the AI tools about explain the Premier League to me so I can start to understand European football, right? So it's like it has all kinds of uses.
Well, I would say that one of the focuses should really be, in order and in your craving to find a solution, maybe you'll end up with more problems.
A solution to what?
Well, let's say hospitals are trying to save cost, or we'll say, okay, we'll use this AI because we think that some Microsoft sales guy told us that, they promised the moon.
Right.
And in the end, look at I don't know about America, but here in Quebec, where I'm from, there's now in the paper scandal over scandal where cost overrun, and when governments try to change their computer systems and they try to change everything, and they've been promised so many things by these tech companies. And in the end, it costs billions of dollars. Nobody knows what is going on. And it's a fiasco.
Right. So we're in that time of churn. We're going to see lawsuits. We have already seen patients die from misuse of AI, several cases in the UK and cases in the US that, you can track. We're going to see that. We're going to see that, we're going to see it. I mean, it's such a sea change, and it's going to take a while, for everyone to figure out where to use it and where not to use it. And so you're right. So LA has an example like that too. Millions of dollars spent on a promise to, I think it was one of the LA big school districts in LA. There's an example of them just prematurely adopting a program and, not really piloting it, making sure it works, making sure the company can do what it promises. Like, all this stuff should be done slowly. You want to take this, like, pick an area, pilot it. It's all that local context and, right. So, if someone's promising you the moon, think twice.
Exactly. So always trust human. I'm on team human.
That's right. I'm on team human too. Definitely. I'm happy to have new tools, but I'm on team human.
All right. So thank you very much for coming to this podcast.
Yes.
Yes. And to everyone listening, please like, share, and subscribe. We have hundreds of views on most episodes, but we have very few likes. So you have to like it. That helps us with the algorithm.
That's right. Feed the machine.
Exactly. Feed the machine so this message will resonate throughout the internet.
Feed the machine so that the humans can be heard.
Exactly.
I like this one. That should be our new slogan.
Yeah. I want to thank you for having us, and we're happy to come back to anytime to update on where we get. Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, the work that you're doing is so precious. Yeah, we'd love to have you back and also talk about all your other hats that you wear. So
we'll have material for another podcast.
That's right. I'd be happy to.
All right, everyone. So thank you. Like, share, and subscribe. Good night and good luck.